Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Competitive Advantage with Zero Party Data. Oh my God, so excited about this webinar. We've been talking about this for almost 2 months now. And I am very, very happy to welcome my panelists, you guys, Brian and Richard. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself. Brian, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Saf. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Brian McIntosh. I'm the Chief Consulting Officer for BlastX Consulting. Been in this business for 20 plus years, really focused on customer experience strategy, digital strategy, and that intersection of MarTech and technology that helps drive that. And really excited to share what we're seeing in zero-party data with our customers, how we're helping them, and really get everybody interested in using this as something that'll further the loyalty and competitive advantage you need as we think about the deprecation of third-party cookies and all that other great stuff we'll get into. So Richard, you go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Hey, Sab. So, hey, everyone. My name is Richard Morrow. I'm the Senior Director of Martech Engineering and Innovation here at Blast, and I'm happy to talk about zero-party data from a more technical perspective, but Brian and I are completely aligned on how great this could be for you.
I love it. Thank you, guys. And I am Saf Ketan. I do product marketing and strategy here at Tealium. And we have a lot of attendees today. Thank you, everybody, for making time for us. So we're going to jump right in. And will not surprise either of you guys. I want to start with just talking about what zero-party data is. You know, just got used to talking about first-party data over the last few years. And now, boom, here we're talking about zero-party data. So Brian, I'll start with you. What is zero-party data? Can we tell our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually a term that was coined by Forrester a couple of years ago. So we'll give them the credit of like putting it together, but it's getting a lot of traction. And really zero-party data is intent data, right? So you think about first-party data, which is collected based on an interaction with a user, and we probably ask them questions and we want to gather stuff on a more defined level of email and name. But this is about intent data, which is really valuable data because it's data we're getting from the customer. They're giving us that data. They're telling us their intent. They're telling us what they want, their needs, and building a strategy on that to basically follow that journey is really valuable. So that's at the highest level, kind of how we think about zero-party data as a definition.
And Richard, this does not feel new to me. I wonder why suddenly this feels like a new topic.
Definitely not new. I think in many past lives as a marketing practitioner and then providing data strategies and above, it's things that we've always leaned on as practitioners to understand about individuals and start personalizing experience. I think right now why it's top of mind is the deprecation of third-party cookies, which we're probably been beaten to death, right? A subject that's been talking about a lot, but now reality is coming and people are worried about how do I still have intimate communications without the reliance of third-party data. And now people are really beginning to realize, how can I start that conversation earlier? And just customers are expecting more personalized experiences, more security around the data that we have, and zero-party data kind of gets enveloped in all those topics.
Yeah, it's so true. So, we've had surveys for a while. We've had just follow-up feedback, sentiment analysis. We've had all these things for a very long time. NPS surveys became a branded hallmark maybe like 10 years ago even. But the reality is that stuff lived in a silo in the research world. It didn't really make its way over to the customer experience side till recently. So it sounds like that's what you guys are saying with all the different trends. People are looking for more ways to understand their customer. And zero-party data gives a really nice option there. So, let's talk about some examples. If either of you guys have any examples, what are some ways people are thinking about zero-party data and customer experience?
Yeah, we'll go through an example. A customer, a global manufacturer of shoes and athletic apparel, and we started experimenting with them on this concept of zero-party data. So, let's assume somebody comes to your website. We'll call him Bob, and Bob comes to your website, and we don't really know Bob. He's the lowest common denominator. We don't really know him, but as we start to see what Bob's doing on the website, we start to understand that he's doing intentional things, looking for things, and if we set up thresholds around he's done 3 things and we can trigger a response, we may say, hey, Bob, we noticed you're looking at running shoes. What kind of runner are you? Pop up a question, and then he says, well, I like running on trails. Okay, automatically we now know Bob is somebody interested in running shoes, running on a trail. So immediately we can serve up content that's specific to Bob about our running shoes, trail running shoes. And then he goes to that side of the website and starts to look at trail running shoes. And we notice now he's looking at everything on sale. So now we know Bob is interested in sale trail running shoes, right? He's giving us his intent. We've never asked him for a personal email. We've never asked him for, your size of shoe, but we're getting this intent from Bob and learning along the way to serve him a personalized journey. And we can go on, but you get the point of like being able to say, he's given us in a very short period of time some data that we can use as a value exchange to give him something in return. And now we have him going, look what they've done for me, personalize this experience. And now he's shopping different sizes. And then we can get more data as we infer and kind of go down that process. So that's a very simple example, but it's a real one. And we have helped our clients in that capacity.
Yeah. So like you get some inclination of what the customer might be thinking or doing. And rather than just making an assumption and putting a piece of content in front of them, at least you can validate that assumption. And now suddenly this whole site can be a little bit more personalized. I love it.
That's right, Sab. And it also eliminates the big pop-up of like, okay, now I see you're on the website, fill out this form and tell me everything about you. And then I'll give you what you want. Well, they're going to tap out at that point, right? That's where we lose them. And that's why zero-party data is so valuable.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this big in the healthcare space as well, Sab. Like imagine that I'm a caregiver trying to find something for someone that I'm taking care of. The experience is much different than me coming looking for something for myself. So this is far reaching across all the different verticals and industries out there.
Yeah, I mean, I love the examples you guys are giving because where my mind goes is when I walk into a car dealership and the dealer will just ask me up front, hey, are you looking for help or are you just browsing? And when you say you're just browsing, they leave you alone. That's a great experience for me, actually. And when I'm genuinely interested and then they engage, that engagement I'm ready for. I feel like this is some of the same thing one of my friends used to say, imagine you're walking into a store and the guy stops you before you enter the store and says, give me your email address before you come into the store. You're going to be like, I'm not coming in. And that's what all the sites are doing these days, So do you have other ways that people can start thinking about it? Because I wonder if it's the challenge today is to think about the same engagement that we've had for a long time, asking a customer a question. We want our customers to think about it slightly differently now, right? So like, can you talk a little bit more about how you're counseling your customers and what you're seeing?
Yeah, Richard, do you want to go and I'll follow up?
Yeah. I normally tell people to think of the perspective of a preference center, right? It's not a new concept like we've been talking about, but really like, how can I just simply ask people, what do you prefer? How do you prefer to be engaged? What preferences do you have around colors, different types of fabrics, right? Like we've all been accustomed to providing this information. And like you said, it's not new, but I think the challenges are people think it needs to be more of like what we traditionally are used to, which is tracking people and inferring things, rather than saying, you know what, let's build a customer preference center. Let's just be very transparent as to what they like so that we can communicate with them and not do all this back end inference and say, well, they looked at this, so this must be what they're interested in. No, you know what, let's just ask them what's important to you. If you think about it, it just goes down to that like person preference and what their intent is. If you encapsulate it in those three major things, you pretty much start understanding why is that person here, what is their intent and what they're doing, and what do they prefer to have communicated with them.
Yeah, and again, it should be to me also happening seamlessly in the background, so it's not intrusive, right? That preference center is intrusive. That give me your email before you even shop is intrusive. But if I do it right, I build a strategy. I have a tagging strategy. I have a JavaScript strategy to make those triggers. I monitor it. That's all happening seamlessly by background, and the user should have a pleasant experience because they're going about doing their business and things are surfacing in a way that they're like, wow, look at this. They surfaced this for me and they never asked for my name. They've never asked me, right? But we're doing it in a way that is building on that experience, which is again that transparency. In the concern of data privacy and GDPR and all those things, we're getting it, but we're not actually asking directly. We're asking questions that are more inferred that then build on that experience.
Yeah, I love where you guys are going with this. One of the things that I've really enjoyed understanding about zero-party data is it can be personal but not sensitive. It doesn't have to be about who I am. It can be about what I want and what I'm looking for. And it still gives me a personalized experience, but it doesn't make me feel like I'm giving you information that you can use to figure out who I am. And it makes a very big difference. You know, we're starting to see some questions.
Yeah.
And thank you, listeners. Please ask questions. It really helps make this way more engaging. So I'm going to start with the first one from Stephanie. Where in the journey are the questions being asked? That's a great question. You know, you just talked about making it not intrusive and making
Right.
it part of the organic journey. Another concept there that's coming up is progressive profiling. I know
Yes.
B2B has been using it for a long time, that you ask one question in context of that interaction and then use that to build the full understanding. So yeah, let's look at this question. Where in the journey would you ask these questions?
So again, it goes that strategy, which is, maybe you determine a threshold. Maybe they're doing something, and after like 3 things that they do, that question pops up because we've now gathered enough intent data to be thoughtful. So establishing thresholds, whether it's 3 actions to trigger or 4 actions to trigger, it may vary by your business model, what you're serving your client. But if we build segments based on that, we can get real clear on what those triggers should be, and then it pops up. Richard, if you want to talk a little bit on the technical side, but just from strategic is go ahead and map that out and understand what is the threshold and where you need to serve up that content.
Yeah, and I think the question where I see, like, if it's not a pop-up, I think it could be more just embedded into the design, right? Like when you come and that hero image basically directs you. Are you shopping for yourself? Or are you looking for a gift today, right? Like, boom, that allows us to filter as the system on the back end for your next click, as Brian is saying, and progress that forward and start catering that experience. So there's ways to make it less explicit or about in your face and just make it part of that more seamless user experience as we're talking about.
Yeah, you know, I spend most of my agency life in auto, and one of the biggest things in auto is just understanding when somebody is researching versus trying to choose a model versus ready to make a purchase decision, and what you show them and what you ask them in each stage of that journey is very different. And we are finding that zero-party data is the perfect solution to figure out where they sit in that journey and then give them the right experience. So I love that. You know, somebody here is mentioning tools, and that was going to be my next question. You mentioned people and process. Richard, I know you used to talk a lot about people, process, technology when you were here. So let's start with the technology aspect of this. If we've already been doing zero-party data for a while, I'm imagining that the tools are not new. Like, what would you say to our listeners about that?
Yeah, so on-site personalization tools have allowed us to do this for quite some time, right? Store a piece of information and then continue to cater the experience based upon that. You mentioned voice of customer tools, so surveys also explicitly work upon this. I think what we're also beginning to understand, and Tealium has a customer data platform, is that more centralized version of what you're triggering from, and then having the rest of your tools explicitly react to that, whether all together or separately. And we just talked about progressively asking questions. Well, think about your different marketing tools and how they can glean off that single data point and ask it in different ways during the experience as well. So I think going back to any tool that essentially can hold and react to a fragment of information is a viable tool to utilize here. But I think what we're most talking about now is how can you store it more long-term, and how can it be done from not only an anonymous state and carry through from when it's a known state when someone does register. And that's really more the up-to-date fundamentals that we're trying to talk to customers about.
Yeah. So if it's in the session and if it's an unknown person, then my analytics tool or my CMS or my personalization tool could probably tell me what actions they're doing, and then that could trigger a question or the experience. If it's a known person and I have maybe a CDP in the back, then it could be a combination of a lot of information that I already have about this visitor. And yes, how you launch the pop-up or the embedded experience, there's a lot of options. A/B testing tools, personalization tools, CMS, survey. Tealium will be launching something for this as well. But there's a lot of options that you have. And more than anything, what we're hoping that this webinar gives you is a different way of looking at zero-party data, so that you start realizing it's another avenue for you. And there's a great question here from Pratik, just asking about where do you store the zero-party data, and he's asking about a crawl, walk, run approach, which I love. So we can take these questions in whichever order is working for you guys. You already started talking about it a little bit, Richard. Where would you store this data? So can we continue with that? And then we'll talk about crawl, walk, run.
Yeah, the storage piece goes back to like how can the best tool essentially utilize the information. So that's more of up to your unique scenario, your tech stack, and what you're trying to accomplish is really. So the crawl part is like, try not to go out and begin this endeavor with something you pull off the shelf. And that's just marketing for me, best practice. You don't need to buy a tool. Normally you have something in the tool shed that'll allow you to at least get off the ground. And once you realize really what the gaps you have in trying to execute, then you move forward and essentially ideate and progressively go from there with the new technology. So I don't mean to reply back with such a nebulous answer, but it really is like, let's just talk about what you have running and let's make that work in this direction. And then let's figure out how to take it up.
I love it. I love it. And then Brian, have you thought about like, if somebody was not doing this right now and they wanted to get started, like what a crawl, walk, run might look like?
Absolutely. I think it's the willingness to test and fail fast, because you have to try what's going to work and what's not. And so, as I said kind of a little bit a while back, was, build a strategy on what you want to accomplish, build the thresholds, build the modules so that, you have the triggers and you have the content, and you're going to have to test it. You said A/B testing. You have to A/B test this as well. What works, what doesn't work. And once you start to get, some feedback on what's working in the data collection, then you can begin to scale it. And I see Marcus had that question in terms of like, how do I build service models? And it's like, I get questions of like, where do we start? I'm like, just go for it. Like the where to start is to Richard's point. You have a tool, you have an idea of a segment, put something out there and test it. That's what's the beauty of web and digital properties, is to be able to quickly change things and do things different. And so that's my recommendation. And once you have that strategy, continue to test it. And the other part of that is to make sure that you are truly giving a value exchange, that you're giving something in return that's of value. I look at customer data in any form as a gift that they'll give you, and they'll give it if you have a value exchange and something in return that you give them. And so in the case of Bob, we got Bob really quickly to where he needed to go, which was running shoes for the trail on sale. Right now we've got Bob, we've got loyal, we've been transparent, and now we might be able to ask Bob a little more personal questions about his name, his address, and get him in there. But we had to earn that trust up front, which is why zero party is so good.
So I love where this conversation is going. So I'm going to keep digging in. So one of the questions here from Maria is, if I already know who the customer is and if we're already identifying them, then what makes the zero party data, which I think is a very nice way of understanding the nuance. So I think, Richard, you started when you and Brian described what zero-party data is. Zero-party data is a subset of first-party data. So we're not insisting that it's something different. I think what makes it unique is the fact that you asked a specific question of the customer and they willingly gave you this answer. So it's I don't know, Brian, do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to say that the way I look at the difference is how you obtain it, right? So again, first party data you obtain by collecting it, and the second, or excuse me, the zero party data is intent data, and so it's all in how you collect it and how you do it, and that basically fits into that transparency conversation of, if I'm asking directly for personal information, I'm less likely to get it. That's how I'm obtaining first party data mostly, or transactional data. If I'm inferring data from the intent, then I'm actually getting the data that they're giving me, which is actually a richer source of data at the end of the day, because it's not demographic data. It's truly your interest in what I can personalize. So think of it as, you're right, it's a subset of first party data, but how do you obtain it is really how we think about the difference.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to make a big difference. Like if you think about the trends in customer experience right now, chatbots is like the number one trend. And the idea of the chatbot is the customer owns the interaction a little bit more, but the customer still has to know what they want to ask. And we are hoping that this is a slightly simpler interaction where it's just a one question, one click response. and maybe you don't have to worry about it so much. But it's going in the same idea. It's helping them feel like it's a conversation, and then they can feel heard, and they can go from there. So I love this one question from Marcus, and I know you picked up on that too. Speaking of tools, how do you see this informing AI models? Which I think is, we can't have a webinar today and not talk about AI. So I wanted to lean into that.
Well, I mean, I'm going to let Richard take that one as our resident innovation technology person. But I mean, look, AI isn't everywhere. I think AI is going to take the form of helping build in some of those prompts and some of those triggers on a way that's more automated and picking up quicker, so that it moves much faster. You know, everything I've learned, and I just attended a big conference where there's a lot of hype around AI. What I'm seeing is AI is helping with efficiencies and workflows and helping marketers do their job quicker and moving with content quicker. And I think you'll see the same thing. But Richard, I'd love to hear your response.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would caution that with AI, it's just more about thinking about the other questions you haven't thought were important, right? As you're collecting information, and maybe you can like kind of weigh that against really how are people traversing your site based upon the categories or subjects that you thought were important, but really the way that they answered these zero-party data questions and overlaying those. Should we be thinking about one or the other differently? And maybe it also allows you to data mine, maybe your filters aren't the right way, and AI needs to bleed into that to think of really, okay, if this person's responding this way and this is what they interacted with, let's create on the fly a new next best action in terms of content or things that are being offered to them. So I mean, it could be really simple in terms of like it offering back questions or category questions you haven't thought of. It can get as wild and advanced of basically re-architecting the whole next click and there on out, depending on your capacity.
Yeah, I love that answer. The way we've been talking to customers about it also is that there is so much information you want to get about the customer so you can give them personalized experiences, but the customer wants to know now what data you're collecting and how you're using it. And in the zero-party data interaction, it could not be more transparent. I am upfront telling you what information I want from you. You're giving me that information, and then I'm using it immediately in the moment to give you back something that's related to that answer you just gave me. So I feel like it's a very transparent interaction, and it also helps the customer understand how you use that information for personalization. And hopefully that's where this thing evolves, because we're just going to be able to collect less and less information behind the scenes. It's going to have to be above board anyway. And sorry, Brian.
I was just going to say that's right back to that value exchange that we talked about, right? I read a study that said, of all consumers, that give their data, either willingly or unwillingly, they're very nervous about how it's used and how it's collected and how it's managed and stored. I think it was like over 75% were really worried about that. But then the next question below that was, but 80% or more will give the data to you if you show me how you're going to use it and you provide me a value exchange. And that's why zero-party data fits so well into this strategy, because it provides that transparency and that value exchange.
Trust, transparency, and value exchange are things that you cannot avoid in your customer interactions now. It's just the way the world works. So, the title of this session was Zero-Party Data for Competitive Advantage, right? So I kind of want to pivot to that a little bit now. We've been talking a lot about what it is and how you get it, but why does it become a competitive advantage? Like, why are we feeling it helps you so much in that side of things?
I think that, things are becoming commoditized, right? Everything is a commodity now. I can get anything, and brand loyalty, while is there for a lot of brands, it doesn't exist for a lot of people. And so if you don't create that seamless experience to get me what I want within that 5-second rule, I'm tapped out, I'm gone, right? And so if you don't think of zero-party data as a way to get to that answer quicker, as we talked about with Bob, you're losing a customer, right? You have one shot there. So the competitive advantage is being able to act quicker, real-time, next best action, as Richard said, and being able to move somebody through a journey much quicker. I mean, how frustrating is it for all of us to try to find something and just not get there? And then we get bombarded with the pop-up that says, well, tell me a lot about you and I'll give you what you want. You've lost me. I will not come back. You had one shot, because I'm not loyal to your brand. So that to me is one of the competitive advantages that I see with zero-party data.
Oh, I love that one. Richard, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think it's the learnings that go with it, as Brian's kind of elaborated, is really like it takes a muscle memory almost, and a way to really execute this well and really create that seamless customer experience and personalization that people are looking for. So it's just like riding the bike, right? You're gonna scratch your knees a few times and things might not look right, but in the end, you may end up racing and winning a few of those. So I think that's really the advice that I would give. And the competitive advantage is getting your teams used to utilizing it, but also figuring out from my end, like the technology piece, how do you get that humming and working together to achieve what you're looking for? And the only way to do that is just start.
I love it. Yeah, I had my first experience of a brand that was using this well with Stitch Fix. They are a personalized clothing shopping brand, and they have a 20-minute survey that you have to take when you start shopping with them, and they have over 80% completion rate with that 20-minute survey, because the value exchange is crystal clear. Everybody understands that the more time they take to complete the survey, the better the recommendations on the other end, and that's what they're known for. And we're not recommending everybody do 20-minute surveys, but the reality is, when you invest heavily in understanding the customer and you make it transparent, the customer usually rewards you with trust and with data. And what both Brian and Richard pointed out here is the competitive advantage comes in the form of the relationship that you build with your customers, and this is one more avenue to get you there. The ROI of this is, I think, I don't know, do you have in your examples with your customers, Brian and Richard?
There's statistics coming out now that obviously the ROI with doing this kind of zero-party data work is going to increase conversions, create more engagement, and ultimately loyal customers. I don't have any specific stats. I went out and tried to think of some, and I'll give you, with the Bob company, we definitely saw some conversion rates. We definitely saw the ability to do more. They were just scratching the surface, and we were using quick surveys, we were using chatbots and all those tools, and we continue to experiment with them. So I would say the overall ROI is yet to be completely defined in terms of I can show you, but we know there's value. We know that it's going to, increase your ability to market and do more conversions of those customers and create more engagement.
Are you finding customers are willing to experiment with you on these? What is the reaction you're getting from your customers?
Again, pretty good, reaction. I think there's this nervousness about what it means when we say zero-party data, and back to the earlier question of, well, do I need another technology to do that, or can I do it today? So there's this hesitation to get in, and that's why I said, like, from a crawl, walk, run, like, just to analyze what you have today from your current technology, what data you have, and just run some experiments and testing it. I mean, it's really not going to harm anything that you do to gather that learning and then build upon there. But I do see some hesitation. It seems to be around, do we have the right skills? Do we have technology, and what's the process? And I think if we can eliminate that and say, this is not complicated, this is really just a step forward from what you're probably already doing today, and you don't even know it, right?
I'm going to just double click into what you just said. You love to talk about challenges at the people and the process level,
yes.
Especially when you're making changes. So let's talk about that in relation to zero-party data. What are you seeing? What do our listeners have to think about?
In terms of change management, or kind of how to...
Yeah, and just like adopting this and bringing this into your practice.
I think it's just, again, getting you need a champion and an advocate to show the value of this and get them in there to try it. It goes back to just, digital moves so quick, and it's always changing, that you have to just be willing to experiment and test. And I get, when we look at different industries, we do see that there's some, hesitation, like Richard had mentioned, the hospitals and that healthcare. They're a little more, that there's a lot of compliance issues around data collection. And when we think about some of the social media things that have happened that is scorched, corporations or companies. So I think there's a hesitation. But I think you have to say there's no risk in gathering zero-party data. This is not, we're not getting PII. We're not doing stuff that's going to be harmful to you. And I think it's a mindset, and sometimes it comes with industry and having a champion to do that. With our customers, we push pretty hard on it, I'll be honest. And Richard can talk a little bit about what we've done with customers, but let's get out there and experiment. We have a whole organization that does that, testing and experimentation. I think you have to be willing to do that.
I agree. Yeah, Richard, I see a question from Mariah, which I think we hit on earlier, but we didn't. It would be great to answer this one. So she says, so is the idea that once you have the zero party data, like the running shoes, that you give a completely different website interface? That sounds like it would be difficult to set up. 100% yes. So I wanted to let Richard answer that question.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah, I mean, in the AI example, I think that's where I went. But honestly, it's like if I'm looking here today for myself, men's trail running shoes, well, as soon as I declare that, just filter what you present back to me based upon that information, right? Male's trail running shoes. If you have the capacity and you have the creative stock imagery to make it all trail running images, well, hype me up. Go ahead and do it, right? If you know my favorite color is blue and you can do some CSS magic to make some more blue elements, you might even get a better reaction out of me. But like, this goes back to like really understanding what you as a company have the capacity to do, but at the very least, what can your website do with that information, and then take it further and further as you move along. And I think regardless, like, you're going to get better results by helping me find that product quicker. You're going to get even better results by beginning to connect with me based upon more of what you know about me.
I love that answer. Yeah. Well, we're finding, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to add to that, back to the where do I start, crawl, walk, run, and how do I get going? Take everything you know today and start to think about what your segments and the data you have and build use cases out of that, because you can test 3 use cases. Let's assume one is running shoes on a trail, one is, marathon running, and one is something else. You know enough about that now that you can build content, build the triggers, build the thresholds, write it in the code in the JavaScript that when that happens real time, you're able to act on it, learn, and move on, because you're not starting from scratch. Everybody here who's going to have I would say a very good understanding, at least of some of their customers and their journeys. How do we build upon that and test what the inferred data might bring a better experience to?
Yeah, in our discussions with our customers, what we're finding is if somebody has a very complicated navigation on their website, just because they offer a really wide range of products, this can help you get down to the subcategory that matters. If you have a very complex filtering system with categories, subcategories, brands, things like that, like Richard was saying, then you can set those filters and I can go straight to the relevant products. And in most cases, people are customizing one hero image or a couple of things, not the whole experience. So a lot of ways to think about it, a lot of ways for you to experiment. I bet a lot of these things have already been in your lexicon for a while,
Yes.
and now it's just getting organized a little bit more.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, like, for everyone out there, like, go try to look up an auto part for your car. If you want to think of the best experience for zero party data, it is like go to an auto parts supply and just add in your car, your year, your make, and they make it so that you can find specifically what fits that. That's probably the best example that I just thought of off the top of my head. And like that, they help you find what you need and it fits your car, because they don't want returns. They don't want all the excess that comes from that. So think of that experience and how they're delivering it.
Yeah, compatibility is an awesome example. When I was building my PC, it was the same thing. Once you chose your motherboard, it would tell you all the parts that go with that motherboard. Another great industry that does this well is the pet industry. When you go to the pet industry, you have to choose whether dog or cat, indoor, outdoor, size, species, and all that stuff filters out everything that comes with for that specific pet, which I find is a great use case. So I wanted to ask, is this really, you think, a solution that's going to help people as they navigate the ID and data privacy challenges? Do you think that zero-party data is going to be something that becomes a bigger conversation in that realm as well?
I think so. Sav, you already said, we're going to have the inability over time to collect data, right? It's just going to get more minimized. And this is really the best way to collect it and, capture it in a way that, doesn't go after PII information, doesn't go after that personalization information. So I definitely see it growing, and who knows where to go from here. I love the car example that Richard, because that is like an excellent, I never gave anything except my car model, right?
Yep.
What an excellent way. And at one point I put something in a cart and I buy something, then I can collect that data and I can then marry it up to it. But, look, there's no perfect way to protect all data, right? We understand this is an ongoing challenge in the digital world with HIPAA and GDPR and CCPA and everything that comes along, but this is certainly a way to help mitigate that. And again, it's the source of truth because it's data they gave you. It's intent data. They gave that to you, which means they also willingly provided it to you, which helps that privacy position.
Okay, so we're getting closer to the ending, and we've been on. I want to say first, thank you to all the listeners. You guys have been asking awesome questions, so thank you for that. That really helps. One of our listeners, Larry, was saying just to talk about what zero-party data is one more time. So I want to combine a couple of questions. So Mariah is asking, in what ways can zero-party data replace third-party data? I think that's a fantastic question.
Yes.
And combining that with, can you just restate what zero-party data is? So maybe we can combine those two.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Richard, do you want to kick off with the third-party replacement?
Yeah. You're still going to rely to some degree somewhere out there third-party data in order to do high-level attraction, the awareness part of the funnel, right? That's what you need to select in order to advertise. I consider where zero-party data and third-party data really collide is basically validating that, or be able to extend the third-party data that brought someone there. You have two opportunities there, right? And that's where I see really not so much a replacement, but consider it more of the ability to build upon, which Brian brought up earlier, is like, and I saw someone say scaling or scaffolding effort in one of the questions, but like scaffold based upon that, but also validate some things, because it is third-party data. It has the ability to be inaccurate. And now's the opportunity for you to validate and essentially grow upon that.
Yeah, and then just going to the definition part, right? So I always think of 4 kinds of data: first party, second party, third party, and zero party, right? And that second is just that secondary overlay that you can buy as list and additional addendum stuff. That'll still be there in some capacity, but that first party data, again, is the data that is collected based on somebody not necessarily, giving you because you've asked a correct question on an email, a phone number, or demographic. Zero-party data is intent data, which is rich data because it's what they've given you through a series of questions or surveying or watching your behavior. And so the purest definition to me is zero-party data is intent data. It's rich data that a customer will give you that you can then build personalization off of.
Yeah, the declarative data that they willingly give you in response to a direct question is how I think about it also. And I know we've been talking a lot about consumer products and B2C sites, but this applies, like Richard was saying, healthcare. We're finding very big use for this in B2B. B2B, in fact, wants to know your role, your title, your industry, your company. That is very much zero-party data, and they have sort of been the front runners of the progressive profiling. If you think about it, gaming is an industry where this is great. Game genre, game category, type of game, size of game, all these kinds of things. We're finding media streaming, very big category for zero-party data. So I think just across the board, you're already seeing this in your day-to-day. You're probably just not making the connection yet. And we're hoping that after this webinar, you at least start noticing how many companies are using this well. And also how just the 10% off for email, while it's the most used tactic for zero-party data, it also is the least personal, most intrusive probably tactic, because I'm giving you very personal information for a discount on a site that I might not even know I want to buy from. So it's just one of those kind of experiences. I love this question from Clark.
I just saw that too. Great question.
Yeah. Do you think zero-party data helps unify sales and marketing departments through data-driven outreach campaigns and improve retention practices? Clark, what an awesome question. Brian, Richard, whoever wants to take that.
Well, first, I'm going to just say sales and marketing are always going to be on opposite sides. You're never going to solve that battle, right? I'm kidding. Yeah, I think to some degree it could. I think, the way the question is asked, it's if we all get better at using data and using good quality data to drive insights into our customers, whether it's first or zero party, I think we begin to unify that. Whether zero party explicitly does that, it's a great question that I don't really have a solid answer for, but I'm happy to come back and use that as a follow-up question, because I've never thought about it unifying departments. I've thought about it as, helping build a better experience and helping marketing deliver that better experience. So you stumped me on that one in a good way, because this is, it's all unfolding for us as how we use it and how we think about it. But I don't know, Sav or Richard, maybe you guys have an answer that I haven't thought about.
I mean, for me, I just think it allows you to see a little bit more clearly, right? Because a lot of times in a B2B environment, I may download something and I'm just doing research. I may also be in a department that doesn't have access to the tool. And I just thought that maybe this had really good information, but suddenly I've given information to download a form, or I downloaded that form and I got clustered in as like a hot lead or a hot prospect. And so that's where sales and marketing really start getting that friction, right? Is this really a prospect? Is this really a lead? So if you think about what zero-party data can provide is like, hey, Richard, we noticed you're downloading this, but are you really shopping today? And then I'm going to be like, no. And that would help the salesperson say, well, I'm not going to pick up the phone. Let's classify that person as a little bit different, or that interaction a little bit different. So I think it could definitely help for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to take a stab at this one too, just because I love the question so much. Where I do feel that it can unify people is you start thinking of the relationship a little bit differently, because you start focusing on what the customer is trying to do and where they are in their journey and what they're looking for, not necessarily who they are. It separates the who from the why. And once you start focusing on the why, I do think both marketing and sales can have similar goals and strategies. But as Brian was saying, marketing is in the business of creating demand and sales is in the business of driving conversions. So just on that level, I do think they will never come together at the end of the day. But if you start focusing on customer intent, like we've been saying all along, or preference, then I think you start thinking about it differently, which I think is pretty great. And yeah, Marcus is super engaged today.
Good
I love
questions.
it. Marcus, you're almost talking to the rest of the audience, which is awesome. Thank you for attending today. I love it. I see another question here that I wanted to take. I was waiting for us to get there, which is from Marcelo. Have you ever seen it used in direct mail or to incentivize people to give you data? Or do you have an example? So I would love to hear if you guys have one. I have one for sure, but I would love to hear if you guys have one.
I don't have a good example of that, but I'd love to hear, Saab, what you have to say.
So in my case, it's not email, it's not direct mail, but it's email, which I think is similar.
Email, okay. Yep.
So we used to use this at Mazda, where it really mattered whether you were in market or whether you were just browsing. So we would send an email as a follow-up when somebody did a build and price, and just ask, hey, are you buying a car in the next 6 months? And the button to say yes or no was in the email. They didn't have to go anywhere else. They could just click that button, and immediately we knew what next email to send them,
yes,
and how to market to them next. And that was a very, very effective tactic that we used to separate people who were buying versus just browsing.
A great example. We definitely have a lot of email examples like that. I was trying to figure out the direct mail correlation, which it's an interesting question, but I don't, Richard, have you experienced that? I have not.
I haven't, no.
Okay, we'll keep going. So Marcus, you're asking, can we persist this data and store it? And absolutely yes. In fact, one of the big things that we at Tealium and working with Blast, we're promoting so much is that start thinking of zero-party data as an aspect that you can use to make your visitor profile or your audience profile that much richer, and you make much better audiences. And for that, you would have to persist this data in your CDP or wherever you build your audiences. So that's the biggest takeaway that I'm hoping you all can have today is you've been collecting zero-party data for a while, but it hasn't been considered as profile enrichment data. It has been considered as research data. So if you make that shift to all zero-party data should be thought of as profile data, automatically you start finding ways to store it, use it, enrich, activate. Those are all the things we're hoping you can do with this data. Do you guys want to add anything to that?
Richard?
No, I mean, you covered it pretty well there. Not a lot more to add, Saab.
Awesome. I think we're getting close to the end. I feel like Mariah and Marcus have been super engaged today. Thank you. I love it when somebody's got so many questions. It says, Stephanie asked, where do I build the infrastructure to automate and centralize the collection of data? Oh, that's an interesting one. Where do I build the infrastructure? Richard, since you're tools, I'm going to let you start.
I was going to say.
I mean, the first thing that came into my head was the data warehouse or the customer data platform, right? Sometimes those could be one and the same, sometimes those could be separate, but those would be the two logical places my brain goes first, because I think there's another question I see about or it was before on really how do you start getting access to this information more widely across the org, and those would be the two places that I start, so that you can start reporting information back to the wider org and taking action from it.
Yeah, I feel like this is a softball for me to respond, being from Tealium. We are, of course, specializing in data collection tools. And in fact, one of the things that we are promoting is that your zero-party data tool can directly be connected to our tag manager and to our server-side collection tool, so that you can collect it from any source. And then you would store it, like Richard said, in your CDP or your data warehouse. And then that would make it available in whichever way. I'm only speeding up because I want to try to get to these questions, and we're starting to get close of time.
And Mariah has a good question, and the short answer to that is yes. So those filters are a form of zero-party data inference, right? So again, like, this concept hasn't been like just revolutionized in the last year. It's just becoming aware as people are dealing with that third-party deprecation of cookies. So this is why my advice is go look at what you have today. What do you have today that you're already maybe doing this, and think about use cases you can pull from that, and then build that unique strategy. So the other takeaway I would say is that, don't feel like this is some net new, that it's some scary thing. Like, you probably are doing it and don't realize it. And it's a little bit easier to do than you probably realize as well to get started.
Totally. One of the examples in the auto that's coming to my mind is, we used to tell our customers, every single customer who comes to your site and plays with the builder or the car configurator is telling you what features and aspects of the cars they like. Why don't we store that data and start learning from it? And that it's exactly like you said, we have zero-party data in our universe already. We want you to start thinking about different ways to use it now. And we genuinely believe that it can give you a competitive advantage. And we know for a fact it will improve the customer experience. And that was really the point of this session today. So Brian, Richard, you guys have been fantastic.
Thank you.
Is there any parting thought that you have for our listeners?
No, just go out there and get started. Like, I think you'll find that it's much easier than you envisioned, and hopefully we open the door to think about that for you. And I'm excited to see what results you bring back to us.
Yes. So we have, in the announcements, we have all our email addresses. Please find us on LinkedIn. Please challenge us on everything you've heard from us. Share your stories with us. Thank you, everybody, for all the questions you asked. You guys make this so interactive and so much more fun. And thank you for attending. Thank you for your time. So Richard, Brian, we'll talk again.
Thank you so much.
Listeners, thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.